Hey everyone, welcome back to the Yossi Schmidt Show. Today we have the great Nate Cain on the podcast. Nate, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I am a candidate for U.S. House of Representatives running in the second district of West Virginia, which is basically the whole northern half of the state. And before deciding to run for politics and get into this, I've been working in cybersecurity for the last 26 years. Got my start in the U.S. Army, and then I ended up working as a Navy civilian and then a Marine civilian. And eventually, I ended up going to work for the FBI as a subject matter expert in cybersecurity. And while I was there working, I ended up becoming a federal whistleblower and exposing the FBI's cover up of Hillary Clinton's crimes back in 2017, 2018, which they, of course, thanked me for my service to my country by raiding my home and making my life a living hell. But I survived and took my family, and we got out of Maryland, decided to relocate somewhere where we could be armed and protect ourselves. And so we moved to West Virginia. And we've been here for the last 3 years, absolutely loving it. In 2020, I got a phone call from a White House staffer asking me to come down to assist with election integrity investigations. And so I did that. Afterwards, I got hired by Judge Gableman to go up to Wisconsin and do some work up there as well. And so I've been involved in election integrity as well, and was an expert witness on 7 different cases that went forward, including the one that went to the Supreme Court. Ultimately, of course, out of 57 different cases that were brought between many different courts, not a single court allowed for an evidentiary hearing. And so it was very sad. But, what happened was we saw a repeat in 2022 with the elections then of Maricopa County and Georgia and Pennsylvania, and a lot of things that were irregularities that should not have happened. And so after the 2022 election, I was praying with my family and just praying and asking God to raise up righteous men and women to run for office. And I heard that still small voice in my ear say, "What about you?" And so my initial response was, "Well, hold on a minute, God. I'm trying to get my life back here." And, I meant other people, not me. And, but I eventually submitted and obeyed and put my name in the ring and have been out there running and campaigning since about January of last year. And so we've been, out there. We've put about 50,000, miles on our car. We have been all over the state, and like I said, 27 counties in my district. So it has been, quite the experience of getting out there. And I really kind of started this as a reluctant candidate, really just doing it because I felt the Lord calling me to. But now I am actually excited about it, especially as I've gotten to meet and know many people throughout, my district. And I've had multiple people, you know, tell me that they've been praying and asking for God to raise up a righteous man to run for office, and they believe that God's heard that call, and I want to help them, and I want to do right by the people of West Virginia and by the American people. Well, the biggest issues that I see going on right now in our country is we've got, a constitutional republic, but it doesn't act like one. We see, our rights constantly being trampled by the FBI, by Department of Justice, by the Department of Homeland Security, by the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency or Infrastructure Security Agency. All of these federal agencies that are basically doing things like spying on the American people using Section 702 of FISA to do warrantless searches on American citizens, which is unconstitutional and illegal. We see the January 6ers sitting in jail and rotting away, after 3 years. Many of them have been denied their due process. They've not been allowed bail. They've not been allowed proper counsel. They've been, kept in horrendous conditions and, put into solitary confinement for long periods of time. And for what? For exercising their First Amendment right to assemble peaceably, which most of them did, and making their grievances known to their government. And when the Capitol Police opened the doors and let people in, and people didn't realize that they were committing a crime walking in there, but yet the FBI has made it their sole purpose to go after everyone that was down there on January 6th and arrest them and threaten them with, 20 years in prison for something that is essentially, the same as jaywalking. And so it's insane, the country that we are living in right now. It is not the country that I served to protect. It is not what I grew up, seeing. And now you see, all kinds of just things that are happening that don't make any sense at all. We're letting guys out that are murderers and rapists, without bail up in New York, and then down in DC, we're putting away guys for 20 years that simply showed up to a protest. How in the heck have we gotten to this place in our country where we are? We had a year or a couple of years in the Biden administration where they forced, our military veterans to, our military service members to take the vaccine that was an experimental vaccine. That was, again, illegal. You saw the coercion being used with government employees and contractors, basically coercing them to take a experimental vaccine. Now you've got over 20,000 people that we know about that have died due to the vaccine, and that's according to the government's own data, VAERS. Who's being held responsible? No one. We see, what about all the people who had their rights deprived of them, under color of law? There's a law that currently exists right now, deprivation of rights under color of law. Who's been charged at the FBI for violating our rights? No one. So I intend, Lord willing, to do something about it. And that's why I'm running. We see lawlessness at our border, where we have, a wide open border. We've got criminal aliens coming across our border, and many of these, not even from Mexico, they're coming from all over the world, from many countries that, are basically not countries that we want to be accepting people from, because they're people that likely, especially if we don't know who they are and we've had no vetting of them at all, they may be bringing diseases. They're certainly bringing with them, if their very first act, let's put it this way, if their very first act entering into our country is to break our laws, what do we think, that they're going to respect our laws, beyond that? And you have a weak administration right now that cares more about protecting the rights of transgenders in the military and making sure that people are, calling, people by their preferred pronouns, rather than teaching our military service members to be warriors. And so you have a weak military, weaker than any other time I've ever seen. And those who had the spine and the backbone to stand up and fight against the, these unlawful orders of, forced vaccination, they were all kicked out. Same thing with the government employees, same thing with the government contractors. There's been a massive purge. And what you have left are basically either those that are all gung-ho and for Joe Biden, or you have those that don't have the wherewithal and don't have the courage to stand up against illegal orders. So we're in a very dangerous place right now as a country, and I am praying and hoping that God will save our nation from utter destruction. But I'll be honest with you, I think it's going to boil down to whether or not the people of America are going to turn to God and repent. We are going to need a revival in our country if we're to survive what we are going through right now. Because this is without a doubt, it's not just physical problems with our military or our border or our economy. You got people spending out of control, like drunken sailors, and it's causing massive inflation all around the country. But, in the end, the only thing that can truly save us is going to be God. And our founders understood that. George Washington talked about it, talked about the hand of providence. They understood the importance it was, to call upon, our God in heaven, to ask for his help and his blessing on our nation. And so we need both that, but we also need people who are willing to put in the work and willing to sacrifice, to try to turn the ship around.
Thank you for being willing to step up to the plate and run. What issues are you running on, are your main focus of the campaign?
So basically, all of the issues that I have, outlined, a lot of them are outlined on my website, and people can find out more about that by going to Nate Cain, 4wv.com. So that's NATECAIN, 4wv.com. I've outlined a lot of my policies and a lot of the issues and what I think about them. but they all basically boil down to a few, key points. And that is that I want to make sure and protect American citizens' right to life, liberty, and their pursuit of happiness. And anything getting in the way of that, quite frankly, needs to be as an obstacle that needs to be removed. Right now we've got, we've got so many things that are going on, whether it is our economy, out of control spending. You got massive amounts of money that have been dumped into the Ukraine, and for what? The Ukraine, it's sad what's going on there, but the reality is we don't have a treaty with that country. They're not part of NATO. And, and what we've seen thus far has been completely out of control spending and, mismanagement of the American people's treasure. The money that is, and at the same time, you see things like veterans being kicked out of hotels up in New York, where a lot of these guys, the reason they have mental illness or have drug addiction or alcohol addiction problems is due to the fact of their time in service and the things that they've been going through. So we've got to put America first. America has to be the number one priority for these people who are supposed to be, quote unquote, representing us. There is a plague, if you will, a mind virus that has been, making its way throughout America, and particularly with our youth. I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we've got, people within, our own ranks within Congress that clearly are communist. They clearly do not see, they do not have a love for America. They do not have a love of country. And I think that they would prefer socialism and authoritarianism. And I think that that kind of thing is extremely dangerous. It needs to be, completely demolished. Communism has already proven itself to be a failure. And, but our military, I'm concerned about national security. That's a huge issue, whether it's the border or whether it's the weakness of our military. We're not building ships right now, but you know who is? China. We're not ensuring that we've got, stockpiles of whatever weapons we need in order to defend our nation. Instead, we're packaging them up and sending them off to the Ukraine. So I have some, big concerns about all of this. We've worked really, really hard under the Trump administration to, build alliances in the Middle East with the Abraham Accords, and yet you're seeing, this current administration, really working against those things. Supporting Hamas by sending them money. This is a terrorist organization. It is not a government. Governments don't go into countries, kidnap citizens, rape women, and murder children. That's what terrorists do. So there's a lot of things that are happening around the world right now. It was interesting. I was talking to a guy a couple days ago on a podcast, and he was from Pakistan, and he was Muslim. And he told me, he says, look, I don't particularly like Donald Trump, but we need Donald Trump because without him, all we see is we need a strong man, somebody that, that will prevent these things from happening all over the world. And of course, he was referencing the missiles that were fired by Iran, into Pakistan, and Pakistan having to retaliate. So we're seeing all this stuff going on around the world, all these countries acting up, these dictators. Do you think, I don't think for 1 minute that Putin would have invaded the Ukraine, had Trump still been president.
Definitely not.
So
Definitely not.
all these things that are going on, we've got to have Trump back in the presidency. That is an absolute must. And I will just say it right off the bat that without him in there, then we're not going to see a rectification of what went wrong in 2020. Everybody knows that Trump won 2020. There's no doubt in my mind. They wouldn't have had to stop the counting of the ballots, send everybody home, and then continue counting under cover of darkness without poll watchers and all of that. That all happened, and that was a reality. The fact is that election was stolen. So until Trump serves the second term that the people already voted for, I'm not going to be satisfied, and I don't think half the country will be. And so that's an important thing that must happen. But then Trump is going to need people in Congress and people, both in the House and the Senate that are going to support those America First policies. And that is who I am. That is what I will stand for. And I am absolutely opposed to corruption. I've already proven that by, blowing the whistle and going up against some very powerful people, at great risk to myself and to my own life and my own, future and freedom.
Well, speaking about courage, you tweeted, for the audience, we're recording this interview early, but you posted this morning on January 25th, that you were called to drop out of the race.
Yep.
Because they already endorsed someone else, and their candidate's going to win, and not you. Do you care to elaborate more on the?
Sure. Yeah, so I had only been in the I basically put my name in the race. I think it'd maybe been a month or so. I announced fairly early, in fact, as soon as I could, and then my opponent, Riley Moore, he announced, and then after he announced, I started getting phone calls from people. One of those phone calls came from one of our state legislature, one of our state senators. And that state senator basically said to me, look, it would, I'd really hate to see you run for Congress and not win. I'd love though to see you run for state Senate. We need somebody to run against our, current, the current state senator that's in that seat. And, would you be willing to do it? And I said, look, I can appreciate what you're saying, but I'm running for Congress, not because I want to be a politician, but because I feel that God called me to run for Congress. So I've got to do what I believe God called me to do. And I don't care, whatever happens, I'm going to be obedient to that calling. And, and then, she, that person continued to persist and and basically say, well, look, if you're willing to run, for that for state senate, you'll get a lot of support, in that race. And I again, politely said no. And then I was told at the end, well, just so you know, I've already endorsed Riley Moore. Then, like, I think it was like maybe the next day, I got a call from a delegate, and one of the delegates, on the House side, asking me the same thing and telling me the same thing and making promises of, support if I run for state senate, which I said the same thing. Look, I'm not running, because I have some dream of being a politician. I'm running because I feel God called me to, and I feel that the best place that I can serve is in the U.S. House of Representatives. My entire career has been working, for the federal government in one place or another. I know where the bodies are buried. I know where the corruption is, and I've already proven that I have the spine to stand up against that corruption. And again, and I was told at the very end, well, just so you know, I've already endorsed Riley Moore. So I was kind of like, I was shocked, but I wasn't shocked. And then my wife went to an event, and there was a prominent leader of one of the Republican clubs who came up to her and, was all being friendly and everything. Hey, I really like Nate a lot. And, I wish you'd, convince him to run for, for state senate, because there's no way, he has no chance in hell in beating, Riley Moore. And again, this is like within the first week of Riley Moore having announced. Who knows what's going to happen? But that to me seemed like, it was clear his campaign had, basically asked his surrogates, to try to get me, to drop out of the race very early on. And, and this is part of the problem that we have right now in politics in America. Corruption exists within not just the Democrat Party, but within the Republican Party too. And there is a swamp, without a doubt. And that swamp's not just in DC, but it's in our states. And if you remember on the audio file that that Nikki had, the guy was talking about the cartel. He made mention of, the Arizona Mafia. And he mentioned about the cartels in every, it's in every state GOP. And I believe that's true. I think that there's, you can call it whatever you want, cartel or mafia or, cronyism or the elites But the fact is what I've seen here is that there is, without a doubt, there are people who feel entitled that, that because of their political pedigree or because of their family political dynasty, that they have a right, to that position. And I disagree. I believe that we have to earn that vote. And so I have been working very hard on the issues that people have been bringing to my attention to try to earn that vote from the people of West Virginia's 2nd District. Some of those things that I've worked on already are we authored a Parents' Bill of Rights, and we submitted that to the state legislature, and we lobbied the state legislature. And that bill yesterday was entered into into our legislative session. And so they will be working on that bill through the committees, and hopefully, Lord willing, it will end up on the floor for a vote, and we will end up with a Parents' Bill of Rights to protect parents, rights against the school system, which has oftentimes tried to take those rights away from parents, whether forcing those kids to have to get an experimental vaccine just to be able to get an education, or whether it has been parents having the right to protect their children from transgender boys being in the girls' bathrooms. And we saw what happened down there in Loudoun County, Virginia, where you had a boy that raped a girl, then he was moved to another school and raped a girl there. That kind of stuff cannot happen. And absolutely, we're not going to let it happen here in West Virginia. We've seen things where, there's been threats of removing a parent's right to be able to homeschool should they choose, or be able to send their child to a religious school if they want. Why does the state feel that they have that right? Why is it that we're one of 5 states one of 5 states in the country that does not have a religious exemption for the vaccine mandates. So how is that even possible? Because obviously, if you are a conservative Christian, you don't believe in taking a vaccine that was created with stem cells and with aborted fetus stem cells, and that is what has happened. And yet we don't even acknowledge, somebody's right to religion here in the state when it comes to that. So there's way too much power there. And so that was one of the things that many people had brought up to me. And there's a lot of other things in the bill. It's a great bill. And I think that it's going to go somewhere. In fact, other states are even taking a look at it, because of how that bill is written. But we've worked on that. We're working on mineral rights. We have a lot of mineral owners here in West Virginia, and they separated the surface rights from the mineral rights. And I didn't know anything about that when I first decided to run. I had no idea about what that even was, but I had to learn. And what I found out was that people who have mineral rights have routinely been underpaid what the market value is of those, of their just shares. And so I've been, speaking out about that. We're going to work on developing some legislation to submit some proposed legislation to submit to the state legislature on that. And again, lobby them and find sponsors for the bill. I'm working on issues where we've got people in Hardy County who are facing, companies due to the Green New Deal that are wanting to put in windmills that are 600 feet tall, from the base to the tip. And they want to put these in within 500 feet of homes, of residential areas. And that's just absolutely, uncalled for. That doesn't make any sense at all. And at the same time, you've got the state legislature, people within the state legislature introducing bills to take away the rights of the county commissions on zoning so that they would be able to override the county commission making those decisions. I am a firm believer in the Constitution, and I believe that the separation of powers is a very important thing. I also think that limited government and having, the widest distribution of government where the power is closest to the people, obviously there's some things that you can't do that with, like the military. That has to be centrally controlled by the President of the United States and by the governors, for your reserves. But for a lot of these decisions, it's best made by the people and by, their representatives that they voted for, the county commissioners they voted for, their state delegates, their, state senators. The federal government has way too much power. And one of the issues that I intend on working on is to, help to return some of that power back to the states by, shrinking the size of some of these federal agencies. And I realize that, I'm one, if Lord willing, I get elected, I'll be one in 435. I don't get to just carte blanche make a decision. So a lot of politicians will say, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. No, I'm going to try. And trying means that I've got to convince others to go along with that. But one thing that I am is a leader. And I will absolutely, work to bring people along and to whip those votes and get those people on board, with voting for what is right for America and what is right for not only, my constituents here in West Virginia, but also for their constituents in their states. And I think that's representation. That is what we need in Washington, not another yes man that's going to go along just to get along. And we certainly, we don't need, more of the crony capitalism, the cronyism, the corporate welfare that's been going on in our country. We need to return, power back to the people.
We appreciate you for doing what you're doing, and thank you for, while campaigning, working on lobbying to get bills already started. You are an amazing person. Do you
Thank
have
you.
any closing remarks before we end this podcast?
Yes. When I started this thing, like I said, I was a reluctant candidate. And now that has changed. I am somebody that really does, want to make a difference and try to help the people of West Virginia and the American people. What I would say is this. It's important that people support those types of candidates, not just in their states, but everywhere. So, people who are following you in New Jersey, maybe you have a good candidate to support, maybe you don't. But if you don't, then support a good candidate in another state that is going to do good things. We've taken in, I will not take money from these corporate lobbyists or these corporate PACs. We've brought in about $90,000 that has come in 100% from individual donors from 40 different states. And these are all people that believe in that America First message and believe, in that mission and what I stand for. I need help without a doubt. I don't have the luxury of all of the corporate stuff. So there's two parts to it. One, we have to do our part, right? What is it? Faith without works is dead, it says in the Bible. But at the same time, we have to trust in God and we have to ask for his help and his assistance. So I am asking for people to please consider fasting and praying sometime before this, primary election, because who we get in there, that is going to matter whether our nation survives or not. And this is a spiritual battle without a doubt. I do need help, and people can donate to my campaign by going to my website, natecainforwv.com. And there's a link to donate in the upper right-hand corner. But just as important, if not more important, I need prayer, and our country needs prayer. So I would ask that people please, do keep me in their prayers and keep our country in their prayers as we are going through this next election cycle.
Thank you, Nate. Everyone, thank you very much for watching the Yossi Schmidt Show. Looking forward to be back soon. Remember, hold everyone accountable. Transparency is key. And catch you next time.
Thank you.